All right. So, welcome to the Project Podcast once again. We've been out for a little while, but we're back and we're excited to be back during these exciting and very uncertain times.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Uncertainty is definitely key here. With that said, we're actually pretty excited about these times because change happens at times of uncertainty. That's when growth really happens. We always talk about how discomfort elicits the environment for growth.
I think what makes things scary for people is that we live in a life with so much certainty, things that we know all the time, and then when we face things that are when we go into the unknown, right, is where we tend to get fearful and scared and all these different things.
So I'm laughing because the movie Frozen 2, they talk about there's a song that goes into the unknown, and someone posted on Facebook about, is it me or did Frozen 2 prepare us for this situation? They talked about into the unknown. When I grow up, all of this will make sense.
yeah, it's definitely gonna, like for me, like in something like this, I know in my previous states, I definitely would have panicked in something like this.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely seeing a lot of opportunity, and I'm excited to see what comes up. I think what we were talking about before, I think this is a great opportunity for just education in itself. Like right here, we're gonna have someone come in. Come. Oh, talking about education.
This is my son Logan. He's doing his homework at home because school is out. All right. Good job, baby. Go put it away. You can put your sneakers on, jacket, and go outside to play for recess.
So we were talking about this, and I brought up, Rances sent me a video on Gary Vee, and he was talking to a teacher and how education right now is like doesn't work. And I feel like this whole thing with the coronavirus and forcing kids to be out of school but go on to online learning is the transitional step in the transformation and the reimagination of education, which is super, super exciting because Rances and I, on the team that we had in New York City, we had built a proposal to build our own school. And now what we're seeing in the world are different schools that are coming up with similar philosophies and similar concepts starting to be built. So I felt like, hey, this is the time that education is going to change. Not just in the educational realm, but also in terms of like our business with VidaProject, moving on to online courses and learning online, where people are constantly building their education.
I do want to take a step back real quick because I think everyone needs to understand your background here again as many times as possible, because Moses, this is his field. This is what he lived and grew and developed in. So tell him a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my parents are both teachers. Both of them. My dad was a teacher. He's still a teacher in North Bergen High School. He was a teacher in the New York City Department for 20 plus years. My mom was a teacher in the New York City Department of Education for 20 plus years. My aunt and uncle from Leonia were teachers in the New York City Department of Education for 20 plus years. My aunt from Florida is a teacher. My cousin is a principal here in Jersey. So my family kind of just breeds educators all over the place. So I came from a background of education, and I fell into that same line of work. And I was a teacher for 10 years in the New York City Department of Education, and basketball coach. I really did it because I wanted to become a basketball coach. So my dad was coaching, and I just loved coaching, which is probably why I love what we do here, because it's just coaching and teaching. But I learned so much about education and how much people learn, not only through my observations of students and like other teachers, but also the practices that we do here at VidaProject. And when I was a teacher, there was a point where Rances and I and two other teachers from New York City decided to build a proposal to build our own school called Life Academy. And it's very similar to what you see here at VidaProject. It's about transforming lives. It's about educating people on how to live the happiest life they can possibly live. And we believe in that for the same thing for our kids. and giving them the opportunities and the experiences to be able to learn and discover and develop their passions so that they can really truly live the life that they want to live while solving the huge problems of the world.
Absolutely.
So then after that, we got into, out of 250 teams, for a $10 million proposal to build our own school. There were 250 teams nationwide, and we ended up in fifth. They only chose.
We ended up
four.
in the final round of the entire thing, and there were just five finalists left. Unfortunately, that was the round we got kicked off. But the cool thing about this was, like, looking at it from a standpoint of why we got kicked off and understanding that it wasn't because of our idea or anything in regards to what we were proposing. It was basically, you have to think of it as, this is an investment, right? This grant is an investment in the opportunity. And we were basically just four guys with great ideas. We didn't have any
experience, no money,
no structure,
no budgeting,
right?
Experience, nothing.
So if we're thinking about investing in a company, what are you going to invest in? Something that's pre-built already, that's, starting up, like a lot of the other four finalists, or these four guys with an idea. And that was, the biggest thing. But we reflected and realized that, and was like, yo, we really have something special here, because even with that, we were able to create and get all the way to this end level. And that I think that was one of the motivating factors for you.
Oh, for sure. Man. Like, I knew at that point that I felt like I wanted to do something bigger. I was meant to do something bigger. So I decided to leave $80,000 and go into this venture with Rances in terms of entrepreneurship, which was like a whole completely new, different ball game. So just the learning curve the past 2.5 years. This is going on my third year in November. September will be my third year on this venture. And it was all to build this school. And it's funny because I talk a lot about my ideas, and they're like, so what is it that you do? They're like, movement, you're a life coach, nutrition, you're a teacher, but you dance salsa and you work out. Like, what are you? And now I'm just starting to think that I'm just life. And that's what it is. Like, Vida, life, life project, life, and that's what I am. I'm just life. And the reason I left was to help people build a life that they want to live.
So right now the kids are outside the window. We set up here because given them recess time and we can observe them. But
now they're observing us.
Yeah, now they sat behind a window and making faces at us. But this is life, like you're talking about, right? This is being adaptable, being able to change and everything, which is a perfect segue to kind of what we really wanted to talk about here, is the ever-changing environment that we have. This coronavirus right now is exposing the situation of what's going on in the world. It's exposing our weaknesses as a community, as a society, as a whole, but really exposing this education reform that's needed for the entire world. So what we're noticing today is, like, my kids are here, my niece is here, and we're taking them along the classes throughout the day while we're trying to do our work as well. And obviously this presents a lot of challenges, but what we're seeing is also the capacity to hold this in our system right now is to a bare minimum, right? I'm having a lot of trouble with the teachers, with how they're communicating. They're not really comfortable with using a lot of the technologies. The kids are just getting really acquainted with it. So there's a lot of points here of pain, which, like I mentioned before, pain is areas for growth.
Yeah.
Which really got us to thinking about this whole concept and education reform as a whole.
Yeah, so again, like Rances said, like the coronavirus, and this is where the conversation I think really starts now, is the coronavirus is presenting an opportunity for everyone, not only in education reform, but on how to live life. So we were listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and the guy from the CDC, or the guy that used to work for the CDC, and talked about the virus itself, talked about different issues that make people more susceptible to the virus. Mm-hmm. It's just like obesity, right? Respiratory issues if you smoke, if you drink a lot of alcohol. You think these things, these fundamental things, and we think about why do people do these things? Why are people overweight? Why do people drink alcohol? Why do people smoke cigarettes? Why do people do drugs? And what it comes down to is like if we go down to the root of it, and it's some of the things that we talk about in personal development, it's the understanding of self, the understanding of who you are as an individual and why you're making the decisions that you do. So I think when we talk about education, we're not just talking about, you know, the structural issues such as like location or logistics of a school or even, you know, like the online platforms, things like that, but we're talking about the content that's actually being taught in the classrooms now, right? And what's important to the human being able to be versatile and survive in times of uncertainty.
So I think that, like, going along with that, some of the points that we focus on in terms of education, we think of it very kind of black and white in terms of like, okay, these are skill sets and points of knowledge that you need, which yes, we agree with, right? But in terms of application and seeing how basically, again, speaking that life term, how life gets involved with all of this, how do you use these skills that you're learning in school to become a versatile human being who can take on any challenge, right? And these are the elements, these are the little areas, the spaces in between everything we're learning that's missing, right? So we just have this random structure. So the point that you said about obesity and abuse, whether it's alcohol, drug, whatever it is, all these points that boil down to basically health, there's no kind of, this is the gray area where I'm talking about, there's no education between those points. So looking at education as a whole, as a holistic kind of endeavor, then we can really see the blank spots that are missing here. If with our kids, we're not just only educating them on reading, but in terms of educating them on how reading can connect to their personal growth, right? So my son is really into animals. He loves to read about animals and everything like this, right? Meaning that he loves to learn about the world around him, other beings, other creatures. This is a great opportunity to help connect him with the idea of living beings, how these other living creatures that he respects and looks up to and thinks they're amazing, how they are part of this whole ecosystem as one. And in that, I think a lot of compassion can develop. So this can easily become a topic of compassion and how we take care of our natural environment, how we take care of each other, how compassion allows us to do that. And then it really becomes internal, because now what is compassion to us? We can really dive into that and understand this is the gray area where it's always taboo to talk about, especially in the educational environment. Stop. You're going inside? Okay.
So
Logan close the door.
Yeah, possibly.
Stop. Don't swing that at the window.
This is education in real life.
Let me open the door.
Yeah, go ahead. But I kind of wanted to talk about how Rances went onto this kind of fork where some people may not see the connection, but what I think is like that gray area, that area of compassion, and how it comes from learning and how it came from reading, is that right now we're seeing areas in terms of the United States with lack of compassion from our government, where they're not giving enough testing or enough opportunity for healthcare for the people to get the services they need to pass this coronavirus, but also from the aspect of people who have, like, for example, price gouging, people who bought a bunch of hand sanitizers and masks and they're trying to sell it for 10 to 20 times the amount of its regular cost, where there are people who need it, doctors and nurses who need it in order to serve the community that's at risk. So like that whole aspect of Logan learning about different animals and developing compassion for different animals translates directly into how human beings have compassion for each other, and how that plays a direct role in what we're going through right now. So while you were away, I was talking about the connection between compassion through reading and how it connects to our situation today, where we were talking about like Amazon cracking down on price gouging, and these people who bought the mask and the sanitizers and they're holding it to sell it for 10 times the amount or 20 times the amount, that lack of education and compassion, that lack of understanding the connection between reading, let's say for animals, or reading between stories of compassion and how that connects to the real world today. It's these stories, it's these learning experiences, these emotions that we feel when we're kids that translates into learning and then applying when we become adults.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part. I think that's the thing teachers or the education world doesn't really necessarily see right now. I think sometimes parents don't necessarily see those things. They think it's about grades. They think it's about getting into college. But in reality, it's about living the best life.
So, like, to that point, that's the truth. The reason why we don't tend to value that as a society as a whole is because the current world we live in, we're still preparing our kids for the current world we live in, not the future world, right? This is a glimpse of the future world, right? This situation is forcing us to adapt, forcing us to figure out how we're going to do education when our kids need to be maintained separate, right? So what happens is, do we have the structure in place? Everyone thinks they do until, the ish hit the fan.
Life punches you in the fucking face. That's
what
happens.
So with this now, we're like, oh, we weren't as prepared as we thought we were, right? And this is the area where we think we're preparing our kids for the future, but we're preparing them for today. We're preparing them for today, and today is not the future. Today is far from the future, because just like in a simple week, this entire shift of how the entire community of the world is functioning with the situation happening. Were we preparing for this yesterday at school? Were we preparing for this last year at school? No, we were not. So this kind of shows this lack of preparation for the future. So if we're creating, really redesigning education and really looking at that from a standpoint of the future, the first thing we need to accept is that the future is the unknown. We're again another Frozen song, Into the Unknown. So the future is really understanding that we need to be adaptable. So we talk about, creating adaptable human beings who thrive in life. Why? Because we're not saying human beings who are able to work in the future. We're saying human beings that are able to adapt, because we don't know what the future is. So if you have the components of adaptability, that means that you have the ability to adjust to whatever situation is happening. You have the groundwork as a community, as a society. We have the groundwork laid out. We have our kids that are able to adapt as well as anyone else. We have our education system as well to adapt, the resources, the connection around the entire system that allows us to adapt. How do we do that? How do we create this adaptability? Number one, we need to understand our human essence. What makes us humans, right? It's our brains, our ability to adapt. So we need to lean into that instead of becoming, specialists in specific fields and being locked into it with a fixed mindset of this is the only way. We need to be open and understand our growth mindset, that we can constantly change, we can constantly adjust. Yes, go into something, learn all about it, become a specialist on that, but then don't stop there. Now you have all those skills, expand beyond that. Continue to expand, continue to adjust, continue to change, because the future is ever changing. And if we don't prepare for that, we're just an extinct species.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the saying that Navy SEALs say, right? You never rise to the occasion, you fall back to your training. And unfortunately, our training for these types of situations, we never got it. We never had it in school. The kids, I think most millennials don't understand what to do right now. I spoke with a lot of my friends, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure about my work. I'm not sure about this. I'm scared. I'm nervous. Yeah, that's normal with the unknown, but if you understand, like, I could be honest, like, if I were still a teacher and I saw this right now, I'd probably be shit scared, right? Because I wouldn't know what to do after this. School stopped functioning. I lose my job. How am I going to pay this? How am I going to pay that?
Contrast that experience to where you are actually now. Where are you now mentally?
So, like, right now, I'm chilling. Like, I'm fine. you know, and it's because I already put myself in this position where, you know, there financial instability, unknowns, not really sure, and even to the point from detaching myself from all like material things, from my apartment to my bed to just sleeping here on the floor with a pillow and a blanket right now. I'm like, hey, I'm good. I can survive. You know, like I understand what it is, and the knowledge that I have about my body, discovering my body, being aware about my body and my health, understanding that information makes me feel even more comfortable with the knowledge about what's going on with the virus itself.
Yeah.
So like just all that training and all that discovery that I did about myself is what makes me feel that, hey, I'm gonna be good, and you know, VidaProject is gonna survive, Life Project is gonna survive, and the school is still gonna be built. Like my dreams have not collapsed.
So I just want to connect that to what we're talking about. Is you mentioned VidaProject, the school idea is going to survive. It's not going to survive, it's going to thrive. The reason why it's going to thrive is because of that practice. Because to be honest, it's not just that, oh, we're not nervous about the situation. We're actually excited about the situation. This has put undue pressure on us about like adapting to the new environment, and we've been putting in work. Like before, when we first got a glimpse of it, put in work, and we tell some of our friends that are also entrepreneurs and running businesses, the business is doing great. And right away we started adapting, like, okay, this is the plans that we're gonna do, and they're like, yeah, that's overdoing it. I can't do that with my business. It's different. Today I got a few messages talking about, hey, what's up, online platform? Because now
everybody is shifted.
Now there's no choice. You have to be ready. You have to be. So what Moses was talking about, attachment, is that what allows you to be ready for something is when you don't have too much attachment. When you have attachment to the way that things are currently, that's when it hurts. That's when it's painful to even think about changing situations. And when it's painful to do that, then you're less likely to do that until you have no choice, until it's ripped away from you, and now you have to figure out a solution, right? So that leaves you in this uncertainty constantly, because now, you know, everything is going awry, and now you have to figure out a solution, right? Where if you were prepared for the unknown, and what I mean by preparing for the unknown is not being attached to anything. It's like anything can happen, right? Tomorrow, a tornado can come in and take this whole place with it. If we're not in here, we're fine. Right? And that confidence in ourselves is what allows us to be able to drive forward. And through these times, and anything coming up in the future, that is what's going to progress us. Not as only individuals, because our mission is not about our individual wealth or our individual success. Our mission is about the world. It's about changing, like my kids, giving them the skills to be able to thrive, giving our community the skills to be able to thrive. So with everything that we bring forth, that is our mission, that is our intent. So with that intent, that kind of, a compass facing that direction constantly, whatever life throws at us, we just, we know what direction we need to go. We may have to go around a tree, we may have to go around a mortgage, may have to go around a house, whatever it is, we know the direction, the overall direction we're going to. So we can adapt, we can change, still to go north.
I think you hit like the nail on the head. I think that the key thing is being able to detach, because in school, what they teach you, like when we're kids, is how to attach yourself onto a strategy to figure out a problem, right? Instead of giving you the problem to be able to just learn and find several ways to do it. And I think you can tell a great story about this, because
so there's two things I thought about. Is number one is your story of leaving education, leaving this exactly what you described, the system of this is the way, this is done, you need to follow this path, and then getting ripped out of that by your choice to become an entrepreneur, and all of that being thrown out the window. It doesn't matter anymore. You need to figure it out. Just figure it out, right? For me, little background on my story in terms of my education. I never was a grade A student. I was a C, if I'm being generous, student. And my skill sets at school had no representation. To me, if I looked at my grades and everything, I was an idiot. I was not worthy of society, right? From that perspective, because that's the rule book that's being placed on me. But in the real world in entrepreneurship, all those points of skills that seem to be worthless in school, in the real world became like skill sets that most people didn't have, and allowed me to really push forward. Because like I mentioned, like I was an idiot when it came to school, and to be honest, you need to be a little bit stupid to be an entrepreneur, because it's fire as a flamethrower hitting you in the face, and you being like, it's okay, I'm gonna be okay. That's what it is, right?
Yeah,
You got to be a little bit dumb to that, because your ability to take that beating, that brutality of life, and be able to take it with, as a hurdle, just jump over next thing. That's how you create. So think of all of that. Like, if school is preparing you to follow this path, is if you hit a wall, that's it. You need to back up, find the right path, and this is how you solve problems going around. Life doesn't work that way. Life just throws things at you, and you need to have the creative ability not to copy the way someone's strategy was to resolve it. Your ability to learn that and adapt to it, and learn that and apply your own to it, learn that and be able to create your own strategies, because you know what? The situation coming in front of you may be slightly different than everything that's been programmed, right? So what happens is, now, if you only think one way, one track mind of like, this is the way this is solved, you're just a robot knocking into the wall, unable to figure out a solution to this wall. If you have that ability to adapt, that ability to see beyond the situation in front of you, that ability to look at the problems from multiple levels, is the ability to problem solve.
Yeah,
that's the key.
That's the key, and that's where I think schools today are lacking that education, and I think it's done through teaching human beings how to detach from things.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody goes through detachment. It's the awareness that comes with detachment. So, for like example, people who go through breakups, that's a form of detachment that people are not really aware of, but they look at it as a problem rather than something to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose a car, a house, your ring, your jewelry, whatever it is, that's a form of detachment. But it's how we perceive it that allows us to learn from it. When we look at it as a problem rather than a challenge or something to overcome, to then face and learn from, then that's where it is. And I think that's the issue that's going on in schools as well, is that we give students problems, and it's something that the students perceive as a problem rather than as a challenge and something to learn from. Mm-hmm. So it makes learning disengaging. It makes learning not fun, because everything is a problem, right? So that's one thing, detachment, how we perceive problems and how we perceive challenges, how we perceive failure, right? These are things that they're not teaching in school. Mm-hmm. They're teaching the skill set, which is still very important, but they're not teaching like the essence behind it, the true intent behind it, what you were talking about. And that's where the real issue comes from. Mm-hmm. And I think that's,
by the way, we're teaching that. We have a course, Renewed Mindset, that we're teaching currently in one school. Yeah. And it made me think of one of the stories. One of the kids in our class was talking about how he failed science.
Yeah.
Right? And how to him this represents that, he's not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. For his parents, it represents the same thing. His parents are like, you failed science, that means you're a failure, right? And these are the messages that we're sending. Even if we don't articulate it that way, that sounds so mean, right? But think about the actions, the representations that are being done that say that, right? If you fail science, that means you're an idiot, right? You're not good enough, and you didn't try hard enough and whatever, and you're going to continue to fail in life, basically, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And that's not the truth.
It's not the truth.
The truth is, if you failed science, and think of it, like, right away what comes up is like, oh yeah, but you're going to fall behind in school and everything like that. Like, this idea of like starting school at this point, ending school at this point, and then moving on to the next phase of life, it's kind of ridiculous, because anyone that lives in any type of real world environment, you're constantly learning, right? And if you're not, you're bored out of your mind. Your life is not an ideal situation anyone wants to be in. If you're not learning, if you're not growing in any capacity, if you're doing the same thing, you sit in front of a computer, drive home, lay down, watch TV, go to sleep. If that's your life every single day, right? You crave that opportunity to learn something new. You crave that opportunity to go on vacation because you're going to see something different. Oh my God, right? Think about that craving. That craving is coming from somewhere. It's coming from the necessity of growth, right?
The necessity of curiosity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So education shouldn't stop there. Education should be a lifelong pursuit.
But yo, you just hit something else too, man. That was crazy because you said like, oh, you learn something from point A to point B, you hit this phase, you move on to the next phase. And talking with people in terms of their careers, they view their career the same way, right? It's, oh, I got to get this degree, and after I get this degree, I get this job, and after I get this job, I work this much, and I get this promotion, and I buy this house. So everything comes in phases that they're supposed to come in steps. And it's because we've been trained to think that way. That school trains us to think that way, that life comes in phases when it doesn't. It never does.
Book recommendation, Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. It's exactly this that we're talking about. It's the idea that he's talking about specifically business, but overall everything that goes into it. That everything is viewed, us as humans, we view our life, our jobs, our careers as a finite game, right? Meaning that a finite game is something like a basketball game, right? It has a start, a finish, it has a final scores, you see who won. But who wins in life, right?
Nobody.
We're all going to the same ending. No matter what, we're all going to the same ending. So it's the idea of shifting from this finite mindset that everything's beginning to end and understand that it's an infinite game, that it's constantly going, that the scores go up, down, every direction. And the scores basically, when you look at it as a finite game, don't add up to anything winning. They're just a reality of humanity. And when we look at humanity as the true infinite game here, then we start to value and see things differently. So from a business world, if a company is looking at everything very finite, right? They view their employees as just a workforce that needs to do jobs and you pay them X amount, right? An infinite view is this is a family, this is a culture that we're developing, right? And the first thing is the employees being well taken care of. The employees being well taken care of also see the company as a part of them that they're going to take care of. It's a community, it's a family, right? So this is the equivalent of a family living in a house, right? And the family saying to the house, no, we don't need to take care of you. You need to take care of us. And the house starts falling apart and everything. The family is just like, oh, we'll only take care of us. The house falls down, we'll just, figure it out. That's the idea, this separation, because we're all just thinking of this ending. When we get to this point, we're done with this. When we get to that point, we're done. But that's not, when we look at the data, when we look at real situations, that is not how life works. That is not how businesses work. But we use this finite measurement for everything.
And I think the schools that we tend to see that are more successful with their scores, like my school that I worked in was technically a school that did well in the Bronx, one of the best schools in the Bronx. The one thing that I believe they did very well was they made it seem like it was a family, at least for the students. For the students, 100%. Like everybody felt like they were a family. And we cared deeply about the students' emotions and how they felt. And one thing that I felt that the school could have done better was the family aspect with the teachers. So I think the schools that do well, and I'm reading Creative Schools by Dr. Sir Ken Robinson, he talks about this, and he talks about culture in the school and how important it is, and how the school, like the administration and the teachers, all came together as a family to then create this family-like culture, which I think happens in the best schools. And now the schools that tend to not do so well are the ones that kind of just look at it like a finite game. Where it's like, all right, these kids just have to scores, right? Just the test scores, just their grades, right? And that's what matters. And sometimes it works when you put it, if you have someone that's really systematic and like a factory and you can get it down. But if you look at those kids, they don't look alike.
I was just watching this documentary about this Chinese company that bought this old factory in Detroit, and they started manufacturing glass there. And the whole idea is like, this is a Chinese company coming to America for production, and they hire a bunch of Americans. And the clash of culture was so huge that they just couldn't quite cross that chasm. And the idea here was how the Chinese, the workers, view the company, right? There are things that we consider HR nightmare aren't even prevalent, because when you see the way that the Chinese view the company, it's like, oh, the way we view it is basically it's a ship. We all taking care of the ship that we're all on. If the ship sinks, we're all doomed. So going the extra miles and everything like that for the Chinese employee is not even like a second thought process, right? And that's one view, right? The Americans saw it very differently. They saying we're a workforce, we're going to build the community together or whatever, but we're still individuals, right? So now you have this clash of the way that these two cultures view things, right? And there was a big issue with, and it still is, big issue with communication from this, just from the essence of the way that you view life. So what happened is that in terms of the Americans, they had a lot of clash with the company because they saw themselves as one workforce, and they saw the company as, you know, rich people telling them what to do and how to live, and they would cut down some of the things that as Americans they see as essentially like a break room and all this stuff, right? While the Chinese workforce that they brought over would, you know, just work through the night, work through overtime, didn't matter, everything. And this clash was basically a fundamental in terms of the culture, the problem with culture overall. When we don't start with culture to begin with, we just look at numbers. So like what you were saying before, just look at, we need to produce X amount, right? What's going to produce X amount is the workforce, is the skills being put into, right? Even with automation and all these things, right? The only things that we can talk to in terms of just systematic numbers is the robot machines, right? Which when you look at business as a finite game, that's what makes sense. When you look at business as an infinite game, that doesn't make sense, right? And all of this stuff is all built by humans. So we are building a world for robots that robots are perfectly adapted to, and a world that humans aren't adapted to. Look at that kind of division there, yeah. Right? We're building this world. This world, we are literally building it, and we're not adapted to it because we lack of understanding of our own needs. Yep. So by us building this robotic world that's designed for the finite game, we're over here getting crushed with our infinite lives because we're trying to adapt to this finite life.
Because we're more than that. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the essence of this country in general, where we are right now, is when we look at the political climate, when we look at the healthcare, when we look at the income inequalities, all this stuff that people are talking about right now, it comes down to one thing. And it comes down to the understanding of self, right? And the education of learning how to understand self, which stems down right into our school system. How's our school system teaching people, the Americans, right, how to understand self? And when we can put those two worlds of the robotic world that we see that obviously has benefits and helps us progress in the world, right? But understanding self and how that looks like when it comes together. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the fundamental issue. And it comes down to culture.
Like to that point too, is like our schools currently are building, they're attempting to build machines, robotic machines that work in this finite mindset for this kind of production-wise, right? Mm-hmm. And we're building machines that are literally replacing human beings, right? So that's the real problem here, is that we're building humans to be machines while we're building machines that are replacing the humans. Mm-hmm. But there's this whole space here of adaptability available, right? This area of, if we build humans to be humans and we continue to build machines that are taking care of that machine part, now what do we have is opportunity here. Opportunity for a whole new world of things that we can create. Because like you said, we need that kind of workforce action that's happening, right? But the way we view it is from this old kind of creation of what education was, which was basically to build machines to work in this entire machine of industrial revolution, and nothing has changed since then. So we're building all these cogs that go in here, but with technology, we're replacing these human components, right? With components that work better than humans, because they're literally designed to do that, to work better than humans. And now the humans don't have a place. But if the humans become human again, do they have a place?
Yeah, of course, man. And even that aspect of like the machines doing it better than humans, it's like, do we even understand our true potential anymore?
Yeah, because
that's
the rule book. That's the finite rule book that we're using of like being able to do this action better than humans. This one action, right? You either do it this way or whatever. But now you put yourself away from that, and now what are then humans really good at? Right? Being adaptable, right? Yeah. Being creative, pushing forward, growth. So you take all this human power that's being just wasted, because it's being wasted by these actions, and you take all this human potential, human power, and you can create.
Who knows? Like seriously, who knows?
We
don't even know. That's
ends. You can create. Period.
That's it.
Right?
Dot. Like there's nothing else. But yeah, man. I think that's where we are. So we're super excited for this right now. We got a bunch of stuff coming out on our VidaProject platform. It's gonna be on mightynetworks.com. So when you guys see it, we'll let everybody know. We're gonna send out emails. We're gonna put up on Instagram. It's going to talk a lot about this stuff. We're going to talk about personal development. We're going to be talking about movement, nutrition, getting your best workouts, how to understand your body, your awareness, all these different things that we feel the education world is missing. So it's components of Life Project, Life Academy, and it's all stemming from what we do here at VidaProject.
Yep.
Yeah. So
thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
This is a little rant and talk.
Yeah. So take care of yourself. Wash your hands. Get your vitamin.
Don't be this close to other people.
Sorry. You get to develop the antibodies. So, all right, guys. Peace.
Adios.